Achalugo stood before her cracked mirror every morning, adjusting her worn wrapper and proclaiming to anyone who would listen, "I cannot settle for less. I am too beautiful to settle for any man. I will continue to wait for my Udogwu. Only the Udogwu deserves this beauty." This was her morning anthem, her lifetime motto, the song that kept her heart beating with hope in the small village where she lived. But there was a cruel irony that everyone except Achalugo seemed to recognize. While she saw a stunning beauty in her reflection, the villagers whispered a different truth behind her back. They called her the ugliest lady in the village, though never to her face, for even in her delusion, there was something almost sacred about her confidence. Achalugo wasn't like the other village maidens who giggled and blushed when young men passed by. She carried herself differently, with a peculiar grace that seemed out of place among the simple village folk. Her mother, a poor widow worn down by years of struggle and disappointment, watched her daughter with a mixture of love and desperation. She knew the truth that Achalugo refused to see, that beauty alone, real or imagined, would not put food on the table or provide security in old age. Every day, the widow tried reasoning with her daughter. She brought men to their small hut, humble men with honest work and kind hearts. She begged them to consider Achalugo, painted her daughter's few virtues in the best light possible, and prayed they would see past her appearance. But Achalugo would have none of it. "Mama, stop wasting your time begging these village men to marry me," she would say, dismissing her mother's efforts with a wave of her hand. "My Udogwu will soon come and propose to me. He will arrive in a fine car, wearing expensive clothes, smelling of imported perfume. He will be everything these ordinary men are not." Her mother would ease in frustration and walk away, knowing that reasoning with Achalugo was like trying to convince the sun not to rise. The girl had constructed an entire fantasy world in her mind, and she lived in it as completely as if it were real. The village had learned to accommodate Achalugo's delusions. When she walked to the stream, she would adjust her tight dress, twist her waist, and fan her face as though she were Miss Nigeria gracing the red carpet. Her only audience was the goats and chickens that passed by, occasionally stopping to regard her with what might have been confusion or curiosity. The village square became Achalugo's runway. She would walk through it carrying herself as though she were the princess of the land, her head held impossibly high, her steps measured and deliberate. The village men sitting at the palm wine joint would watch her approach, elbowing each other and preparing their jokes. "See Miss Universe passing," they would call out, bursting into laughter that echoed across the square. But what they didn't understand, what they could never understand, was that Achalugo genuinely didn't see them as her equals. In her mind, they were background characters in the great story of her life, waiting for the real hero to appear. She had their insults, every single one, but she never let them pierce the armor of her confidence. If anything, their mockery only reinforced her belief that she was different, special, destined for something greater than this village could offer. Despite Achalugo's rejections, her mother's persistence knew no bounds. Every week, at least one brave man in the village would attempt to propose marriage to Achalugo after much begging from her mother. And one after another, she sent them home in shame, their pride crushed, their offerings rejected. Okoro the hunter was the first to try his luck. He arrived at their hut carrying 3 tubers of yam and a bottle of palm wine, traditional gifts that represented his honest intentions. He had practiced his speech the night before, imagining how grateful Achalugo would be that a man of his skills wanted to marry her. He cleared his throat and proclaimed, "Achalugo, I have come to make you my wife." Achalugo looked at him from head to toe, her hands planted firmly on her waist in a gesture of judgment. What she saw didn't impress her in the slightest. His clothes were worn from days in the forest, his shoes were cracked and dusty, and there was an earthiness about him that spoke of hard work and simple living. "Your body is smelling poverty," she said flatly, her words cutting through the air like a knife. Okoro blinked, uncertain he had heard correctly. Yes, your body is smelling poverty. Look at your shoes. Is it greeting me or the sun? I cannot marry a man whose body odor is greeting people." The poor hunter gathered his yams with trembling hands and left, his dignity in tatters. By the next morning, he was seen drinking palm wine under the mango tree with his friends, muttering bitterly, "See somebody I want help. Let her marry that her Udogwu, let me see." The next morning brought Oki the fisherman, wearing his best wrapper and holding a catfish in a calabash. He had chosen his biggest catch, hoping to impress Achalugo with his fishing skills and ability to provide. His smile was wide enough to show his missing front teeth, a casualty of his dangerous profession. "Achalugo," he said, attempting charm, "I have been fishing for love and I caught you." Achalugo stepped back dramatically, her hand flying to her nose as if repelled by an invisible force. "Stop talking. Your mouth stinks like yesterday's fish market. I cannot marry a man whose breath can chase away mosquitoes." Oki stood there embarrassed, still holding his fish. Even the fish looked disappointed, its dead eyes seeming to judge the failed proposal. He left without another word, and the story of his rejection spread through the village like wildfire. By the third week, word had spread throughout the village and even to neighboring communities. Achalugo's impossible standards had become legendary, the subject of countless conversations at the market, the stream, and every gathering place where villagers met. Some maidens expressed sympathy tinged with confusion. "I pity the men proposing marriage to her," they would say, shaking their heads. "Between them and Achalugo, who will settle for who?" Others were less kind, whispering behind their hands about pride and delusion. Even the village women at the market couldn't stop talking about her. "Who will even marry that ugly thing?" one woman asked while sorting through her vegetables. "She's even lucky some men are interested in her," another added, her voice carrying the weight of harsh village wisdom. But Achalugo's mother didn't give up. She understood what her daughter refused to acknowledge, that age was no longer on Achalugo's side, and her parents made the situation even more urgent. As a mother, she was driven by love and fear in equal measure, desperately trying to secure her daughter's future before it was too late. The next victim of Achalugo's rejection was Odogwu the carpenter. His friends had warned him not to go, sharing stories of the hunter and the fisherman, but Odogwu had convinced himself that he would be different. "She don't have a choice. She will accept me," he declared confidently, though his voice betrayed his nervousness. He approached Achalugo with a flower he had plucked from Mama Nkichi's fence, hoping the gesture would seem romantic. "Achalugo," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "I know you are waiting for your Udogwu, but maybe I can be the one." Achalugo crossed her arms and stared pointedly at his worn slippers, her expression one of theatrical disbelief. "Do you own a motorcycle?" Odogwu laughed awkwardly, not yet understanding that he had already lost. "No, but I have a wheelbarrow." Achalugo gasped, her hand flying to her chest as if she had been mortally wounded. "A wheelbarrow? So you want me to sit at the back while you push me around the village like fresh cassava? Abomination. At least own a motorcycle before I can even consider breathing near you." Odogwu left with shame burning his cheeks. He couldn't face his friends after the rejection, choosing instead to take the long way home through the forest, where no one would see his humiliation. By now, the entire village had concluded that Achalugo was under a special kind of spell. Not the witchcraft type that required herbs and incantations, but the type that makes people see reality completely differently from everyone else. Even the chief's wife, known for her measured words and wisdom, commented, if pride was palm oil, Achalugo's head would fry plantain all by itself. Despite the growing list of rejections, Achalugo remained unmoved. She continued her daily routine, walking around with her head high, swinging her waist like a runway queen, and proclaiming every morning, "I cannot settle for less. I am too beautiful to settle for any man. Only the Udogwu deserves this beauty." The women at the stream would whisper behind her back, their voices mixing with the sound of water being drawn and clothes being beaten against stones. "My sister, which beauty? Which Udogwu will settle for this ugly walking corpse?" But Achalugo seemed immune to their words, protected by her unshakable self-belief. One evening, as the sun set over the hills painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, another man approached her. This time it was Obaina the palm wine tapper, and he was different from the others. Unlike the previous suitors who had come at Achalugo's mother's urging, Obaina came of his own accord. He had watched Achalugo for years, and somehow, despite everything, he had fallen genuinely in love with her. He didn't see her the way the village saw her. When he looked at Achalugo, he saw beyond the surface to something that moved him deeply. Perhaps it was her confidence, or her unwavering belief in herself, or simply the mystery of the human heart that cannot always explain its choices. Obaina was kind, respectful, and humble. He brought coconut and roasted corn, simple gifts but ones he knew Achalugo enjoyed. He had watched her enough to learn her preferences, a detail that spoke of genuine affection rather than mere obligation. He smiled warmly and said softly, Achalugo, I may not be rich, but I have a good heart. I will work hard for you. I will respect you. I will make you happy if you give me the chance. For a moment, something flickered in Achalugo's eyes. Perhaps it was recognition of his sincerity, or a brief doubt about her chosen path. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by her familiar certainty. Achalugo rolled her eyes dismissively. Good heart. Will your good heart buy me a car? Will your good heart build me a house? You are not my class. I am waiting for my Udogwu, the man who will come in an SUV car smelling like imported perfume. Obina sighed deeply, the pain evident in his face. Unlike the others, he didn't live in anger or bitterness. He simply walked away quietly, carrying his rejected gifts, his heart heavy with the knowledge that love alone wasn't enough to bridge the gap between Achalugo's dreams and reality. The villagers who witnessed this final rejection laughed, but their laughter held less amusement than before. Even Udogwu himself will fear this one, they said, shaking their heads. Eventually, every man in the village gave up. The parade of suitors ended, and Achalugo was left alone with her dreams. But she didn't seem discouraged. She kept waiting, brushing her non-existent baby hairs in the mirror, repeating her favorite line like a prayer, I will wait for my Udogwu. That evening, Achalugo's mother sat in front of her yard, lost in deep thought, holding a small mirror in her weathered hands. The mirror was one of their few possessions, its glass spotted with age, its frame worn smooth by countless hands. She had used it on her own wedding day many years ago, when she too had been young and full of dreams. Now those dreams seemed like they belonged to another lifetime. Her husband was gone, taken by fever when Achalugo was still a child. She had raised her daughter alone, working her fingers to the bone in other people's farms, taking in washing, doing whatever was necessary to survive. Through it all, she had held on to one hope, that Achalugo would marry well and find the security that had eluded her own life, but that hope was slipping away with each passing day, with each rejected suitor, with each proclamation about the mythical Udogwu who never seemed to arrive. Achalugo, she called out, her voice carrying the weight of years of worry. Achalugo, come here. I want to talk to you. Achalugo emerged from their hut and walked over with her characteristic queenly gait, sitting beside her mother with an air of patience, as if humoring a child who didn't understand the ways of the world. My daughter, her mother began, choosing her words carefully, I want you to take a look at this mirror. Look at yourself very well. You are not getting younger. You are not as beautiful as the other maidens. Achalugo took the mirror from her mother's hands and studied her reflection. Where her mother saw hard truths that needed to be acknowledged, Achalugo saw something entirely different. Mama, I don't know what you are saying. Can't you see this beauty I am seeing? I won't settle for less. I know my type of man. When he comes, I will settle down. Her mother's patience snapped. Stop it, Achalugo. Stop it. Her voice rose with frustration and fear. Which Udogwu are you talking about? I have brought several men into this house and you chased them away. I am your mother, Achalugo. I won't lie to you. No rich man will want to marry a village girl with this your look. The words hung in the air between them, harsh but spoken from love. Her mother's voice softened, becoming almost pleading. I want you to marry the palm wine tapper. He truly loves you and he will make a great husband to you. Better a man who loves you than one who has money but treats you like that. Achalugo didn't say a word. She stood up slowly and went back to her hut, her silence more ominous than any argument. That night she couldn't sleep. The words of her mother cut deep into her mind, finding cracks in the armor of her confidence. For the first time, doubt crept in like water through a damaged roof. Was her mother right? Was she waiting for something that would never come? The question circled in her mind as the night stretched on, dark and endless. But by morning, as the first light crept through her window, Achalugo had made her decision. She would not give up. She would prove everyone wrong. The next morning, Achalugo woke up with renewed determination. She bathed carefully, did her makeup as usual, powder applied liberally, lips colored with local pomade, her best wrapper tied with precision. Today would be different. Today she would take control of her destiny. She went to the village square and chose her spot carefully, under the shade of a big iroko tree that stood at the entrance to the village. I will wait here, she announced to no one in particular. Any man who comes in a car to this village will see me first before anyone. I must bring my Udogwu home and prove to my mother wrong. And so began Achalugo's vigil. Day after day, week after week, she sat under that tree. She adjusted her blouse countless times, practiced her smile until her cheeks ached, and kept her eyes fixed on the dusty road that led into the village, waiting for the sound of a car engine that would change her life. Weeks turned into months, and the seasons changed around her. The rains came and went, the dry season baked the earth, and still Achalugo waited. She became a permanent fixture of the village square, as much a part of the landscape as the tree itself. Every evening, as other villagers went about their lives, farming, trading, raising children, living, Achalugo sat in her chosen spot. She would adjust her blouse, practice her smile, and imagine the moment when her Udogwu would finally appear, like a scene from the Nollywood movies she had watched on the rare occasions when the village got electricity. Children grew accustomed to seeing her there. At first, they would ask, "Auntie, who are you waiting for?" And she would smile proudly and reply, "My Udogwu." Eventually, they stopped asking, accepting her presence as one of the unchanging facts of village life. The villagers developed a mixture of pity and amusement toward her. Some brought her food, unable to watch her sit there day after day without offering help. Others simply shook their heads and walked past, having long since given up trying to talk sense into her. The palm wine joint across the square provided a chorus of commentary. The men who gathered there would occasionally call out jokes, but even their mockery had become routine, lacking the sharp edge it once had. Achalugo had become less of a person to them and more of a curiosity, a cautionary tale they told their daughters about the dangers of pride, but Achalugo had none of it, or if she did, she gave no sign. Her eyes remained fixed on that dusty road, her hope undiminished by the passage of time. In her mind, every day brought her closer to the moment when her patience would be rewarded, when her Udogwu would finally arrive and vindicate her years of waiting. Then one afternoon, everything changed. The air itself seemed different, charged with possibility. The goats stopped bleating mid-sound, the chickens froze in their pecking, and even the palm trees seemed to stand straighter. From somewhere in the distance came a sound that Achalugo had been waiting years to hear, the loud rumble of a motorcycle engine. Broom, 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 broom. The sound grew louder, closer, more real than any of Achalugo's dreams. She jumped to her feet with a speed that surprised everyone who had watched her sit motionless for so long. She gasped dramatically, clutching her chest as if her heart might leap out. "It is him," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "My Udogwu has come." The motorcycle appeared, kicking up dust everywhere like a scene from an action movie. It was red and shiny, or at least it had been shiny once. The rider wore dark sunglasses, a red shirt that might have been fashionable in the city, and had one hand stylishly draped over the handlebar in a pose he had clearly practiced. The children of the village came running from all directions, shouting excitedly, "Udogwu don't come! Udogwu don't come!" Their voices carried a mix of genuine excitement and mockery, though they themselves might not have known which was stronger. The man parked directly in front of Achalugo with a flourish. He pulled off his sunglasses slowly, dramatically, revealing eyes that held a mix of confidence and something else, perhaps the same delusion that drove Achalugo herself. "Hello, fine girl," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. Achalugo almost fainted. Her knees weakened, and she had to remind herself to breathe. Her inner voice screamed with triumph, "This is it. The moment the village will know I am not meant for ordinary men. My patience has paid off. My Udogwu has finally arrived." "Good afternoon, sir," she managed to say, blinking rapidly, her voice suddenly sweet as honey. The man smiled, revealing two missing teeth that somehow didn't diminish his confidence one bit. "My name is Udogwu," he announced, "but people call me Udibans." Achalugo's eyes widened to impossible proportions. "Udogwu," she breathed, as if the name itself was magical. He nodded confidently, his chest swelling with pride. "Yes, original Udogwu of Umia, exporter, importer." He waved his hand vaguely, as if encompassing vast business enterprises that existed somewhere in the realm of imagination. The villagers watching from afar had already started whispering among themselves. If Achalugo accepts this man, I am not the son of this land, one swore, while others elbowed each other and tried to stifle their laughter. Suddenly, Udogwu brought out his phone with a flourish. But it wasn't really a phone, it was a small torchlight phone with a badly cracked screen that looked like it had been dropped one too many times. Nevertheless, he held it with the pride of someone showing off the latest technology. He shouted loudly, making sure everyone in the village could hear, "Hello. Hello. Put me through to Chikudi. Tell him I have found the queen of my empire." His voice carried across the square, dramatic and important sounding. What he didn't know, and what Achalugo couldn't see from where she stood, was that the call wasn't even connected. He was pressing the calculator app, random numbers appearing on the screen while he carried on his imaginary conversation. Achalugo gasped with admiration. In her mind, this was proof of his importance, a man who conducted business right there in the village square, who had people waiting for his calls, who spoke of empires and queens. The villagers went food. See Udogwu with a cracked touch phone, Mama whispered to her neighbor, both women barely containing their laughter. This one not comedy, another added. Udogwu moved closer to Achalugo, looking deep into her eyes with what he imagined was romantic intensity. "Achalugo," he said, his voice dropping to what he thought was a seductive tone, "when I saw you, I knew you were not like other girls. You are internationally local, and I like local girls." The phrase, internationally local, didn't actually mean anything, but Udogwu delivered it with such confidence that it almost sounded impressive. He continued, warming to his theme, "Marry me and I will take you to places." For a moment, Achalugo allowed herself to be swept up in the romance of it all. But then her practical side, the same side that had rejected every other suitor, kicked in. She frowned slightly, her business face replacing her romantic one. "Udogwu, let me ask you something. Do you own a car or a mansion in the city?" Udogwu smiled, seemingly unconcerned by the question. "No, I don't own a car. I don't own a house as well. I live with my uncle in Onitsha. Even the motorcycle I am riding, my uncle bought it for me to use for Okada business." He said it all matter-of-factly, as if these revelations wouldn't change anything. Achalugo felt something cold settling in her stomach. "You mean you don't own anything?" "No," Udogwu admitted cheerfully, "but I can take good care of you from the money I earn from my Okada business. I make good money, you know. Sometimes up to 1,000 naira in a day." Achalugo stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. The cracked phone, the borrowed motorcycle, the missing teeth, the vague talk of import-export that clearly meant nothing. This wasn't her Udogwu. This was just another village man, perhaps even worse off than the ones she had rejected. She leaned back slowly, her eyes traveling from his head to his toes, taking in every detail with new understanding. "You mean I have been wasting my time with you all this time? I cannot marry a poverty-stinking man like you. Look at the phone you are using." Udogwu's face changed. The confidence drained away, replaced by anger and hurt pride. He laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "See somebody I want help. With this your ugly-looking face like back of my grandmother's pot, I pity the man who will marry you." With that, he kicked his motorcycle to life and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and the echo of his engine as his parting gift. The villagers burst into laughter. One man even fell off his chair, clutching his sides and shouting, "Udogwu, come back. Ooh, this one is TikTok version of Udogwu." Even with everyone laughing, Achalugo pretended to walk with her head high. But something had changed. For the first time, her confidence seemed forced, her queenly walk less certain. Her ego was bruised, bleeding internally where no one could see. She walked home carrying shame like a heavy load on her back, wondering for the first time if perhaps the villagers were right and her Udogwu would never come for her. When she reached home that evening, she walked straight to her room without greeting anybody. She removed her wig slowly, like a warrior removing armor after a lost battle. She sat on a bamboo bed and stared at her mirror, really stared at it. Perhaps for the first time in years, her reflection didn't smile back at her. "Am I making the right choice by waiting for my Udogwu?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "So many ladies waited and finally found their Udogwu. Maybe mine is just stuck in traffic." She tried to smile at her own joke, but the smile died before it fully formed. Just then, her mother appeared at the door, shaking her head sadly. "Keep waiting," she said, not unkindly but with resignation. "Keep waiting. Your mates are getting married one by one and you are here waiting for somebody you don't even know." But by morning, Achalugo's moment of doubt had passed. She bathed, did her makeup, and returned to her spot under the tree. If anything, the incident with fake Udogwu had only strengthened her resolve. The real Udogwu was still out there, she told herself. That man yesterday was just a test, a false prophet sent to shake her faith. Time moved like harmattan wind, inevitable and relentless. The other maidens who had once been her age mates began to marry, one by one. Okoro married Ngozi, the quiet girl who worked at her mother's farm. Oki married Amarochi, despite his fish-smelling breath. Even Obu the wheelbarrow man married a fine girl from the next village, a practical woman who didn't care about motorcycles but only wanted peace and a man who would treat her kindly. Every Saturday, Achalugo dressed up in her finest wrapper and attended these weddings, a smile plastered on her face while her heart grew heavier with each celebration. When people asked, as they always did, "Achalugo, when will we attend yours?" she would raise her chin defiantly and say, "Mine will shake the village when my Udogwu comes." But year after year, the only thing shaking was the mango tree beside her father's old hut, moved by winds that came and went while Achalugo remained frozen in her waiting. Soon, she became the only unmarried maiden left in the village. Her former friends, now wives and mothers, would pass by with their children clinging to their wrappers, calling out, "Auntie Achalugo," in sweet, innocent voices. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. She had rejected every man who came, waited for her perfect Udogwu, and now found herself alone while those she once considered beneath her notice lived the lives she had dreamed of, husbands who loved them, children who gave them purpose, homes filled with laughter and life. Yet every evening, without fail, Achalugo sat at the village square. She wore her best wrapper, adjusted her blouse with the same careful precision, and gazed down the dusty road with eyes that had learned to see things that weren't there. The children, those who had been born after her vigil began, would run past her shouting, "Auntie, who are you waiting for?" She would smile, that same confident smile that had never wavered, and reply, "My Udogwu." They would giggle and whisper to each other as they ran off to play. "Since we were born, Auntie Achalugo has been waiting for her Udogwu," they would say, the way children speak of things that have always been and always will be, like the sun rising or the rain falling. Many rainy seasons passed. The village changed around Achalugo like scenery in a play. Young men became old men, children became parents, and still she sat. Even the tree she used to sit under, that mighty Iroko that had seemed eternal, grew old and bent, its branches twisted by time and weather, a mirror of the woman beneath it. Strangers passing through the village would notice her and ask, curiosity mixed with confusion, "Who is that woman sitting by the square with powder all over her face?" The villagers would just smile, a sad knowing smile, and say, "That's Achalugo. She's still waiting for her Udogwu." No further explanation was needed or given. And every evening, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors before surrendering to night, Achalugo would whisper to herself, her mantra unchanged by the years, "I cannot settle for less. Only the Udogwu deserves this beauty." The wind would blow through the empty square, lifting dust devils that danced and died, and even the wind seemed to carry a message, a sigh that sounded almost like words, "Udogwu, please." She's still waiting. Her mother had long since passed away, taking with her the worry and the hope she had carried for her daughter. The hut where Achalugo had grown up now leaned precariously, its walls crumbling, its thatch gone grey. But Achalugo remained, constant as the North Star, sitting in her spot, waiting. The villagers no longer laughed. They had moved past amusement to something deeper, a kind of reverent sadness for a life spent waiting for something that would never come. Some said she had become a ghost, not in the literal sense, but in the way she existed in the village without truly being part of it, visible but untouchable, present but absent. Young mothers used her as a cautionary tale, whispering to their daughters as they passed, "See what happens when you let pride rule your heart. See what becomes of those who wait for perfection instead of accepting the good that stands before them." But Achalugo heard none of it, or perhaps she had simply learned to unhear it, the way one stops noticing the sound of crickets or the feel of familiar ground beneath one's feet. Her eyes remained fixed on that road, her hope preserved like a flower pressed between the pages of a book, dead but retaining its shape, its color faded but its form intact. Till today, the story says, Achalugo is still waiting for her Udogwu. In that village, under that bent and aging tree, she sits as she has always sat, as perhaps she will always sit, a monument to pride, to dreams, to the human capacity for self-deception, and perhaps, in some strange way, to fate itself, for what is fate but the continued belief in something unseen, the persistence of hope against all evidence, the refusal to accept the reality that others insist is truth. In this, at least, Achalugo had succeeded beyond measure. She had never settled for less, never compromised her standards, never accepted anything but the perfection she sought. And so she waits still, powder on her face, her best wrapper tied with care, her eyes on the horizon, whispering to the empty air, I cannot settle for less. I am too beautiful to settle for any man. Only the Udogwu deserves this beauty. The village moves on without her, life flowing like water around a stone, but the stone remains, unmoved and unchanging, waiting for a flood that will never come. Thank you for joining us on Achalugo's journey, a story that reminds us all about the importance of balance between our dreams and reality. Sometimes the greatest treasures in life are found not in waiting for perfection, but in appreciating the genuine love and opportunities that stand before us. If this story touched your heart, made you think, or simply entertained you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring folk tales and life lessons. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our stories. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What lesson did you take from Achalugo's story? Do you know someone who reminds you of Achalugo? What would you have done differently in her situation? Your engagement helps us bring more meaningful stories to life. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Until next time, may you find wisdom in waiting, but also courage in accepting the blessings already before you.